G'day mates, today's Battlefield 3 loadout is going to feature the Australian Army. Both my Australian and Austrian subscribers have been requesting that I use the AUG as part of a loadout to feature one of their country's forces. So for this episode I thought I'd treat my Aussie friends to a loadout to play as the ADF, Australia's Defence Forces. In order to use that AUG A3 in game we need to play as the assault kit. So let's get started and take a look at the AUG and the other weapons we're going to use as part of this Australian Army setup. The Australian Army always springs to mind when you think of users of the AUG. Australia actually used their own variant of the Steyr AUG, the F88 Oz Steyr. These slight modifications over the standard AUG include optimisation for a slightly heavier round. So one of the first attachments we'll go for our Australian Army loadout is that heavy barrel to relate to this. A cool optic that's used on those F88 AUGs is an ACOG RMR. This is basically an ACOG sight with a tiny little reflex sight plonked on top, much like the hybrid sights that have now been introduced to Call of Duty. I think I mentioned this in a previous loadout, but it would have been really cool if we had these things available in Battlefield 3. I've never personally been a big fan of those longer range optics like the ACOG because of that more pronounced recoil in Battlefield. Having a sight where you could switch between long and short ranges using that reflex and or ACOG would have been really cool in Battlefield. With combat being spread over such a variety of different terrains, you can never really decide whether to go with a long or short range optic. I was dreading using the ACOGs for this loadout because of experience with it on other weapons, but I actually found that it worked really well on the AUG. I could quite easily keep that recoil under check with some burst firing, and if I saw some targets way off in the distance I could switch over to that semi-auto mode and quite easily pick off snipers with a few quick pulls of the trigger. And as we've seen with many of these real-life military loadouts, the foregrip is always very popular, and we'll make use of it once again for this Australian Army loadout. The AUGs used by the Aussies can also be fitted with a grenade launcher, so you might otherwise want to leave this attachment slot blank in order to use that underslung rail with a grenade launcher in place of the medic kit. But with the AUG A3 in Battlefield 3 having quite high side-to-side recoil, at least the foregrip is going to help its in-game performance, unlike some of the other weapons where the foregrip wasn't really required. The standard sidearm issued to Australian Defence Forces soldiers is the Browning High Power. Obviously we don't have this in game, but we can choose the M1911 purely for its similarities in appearance. One main difference between the 1911 and the Browning High Power used by the Aussies is the different calibers of 45 versus 9mm. So if you're wanting to stay particularly true to real life, you might otherwise want to go with that MP443. But moving on, let's take a look at some specialisations, gadgets and camo to finish off this Australian Army loadout. Because we're using the assault kit, we'll go with the plain old gadgets of medic kit and defibrillators. Like I mentioned, if you did want to use that underslung rail and equip with that M320 grenade launcher, that would be a good fit for this loadout. But I personally prefer to be able to regenerate my health with those little med packs. Like many NATO forces, Australia's primary operations are currently in the Middle East, in Afghanistan and Iraq, working together in the war against terror and keeping those Taliban suppressed. So for the specialisation we'll go with suppressive fire. Then to finish off these loadouts we always have to pick out a camouflage pattern. Australia's classic pattern is that DPCU pattern, also affectionately named Jelly Bean Camo. Throughout 2012 Australia moved over to a variant of the US's multicam, but for this loadout we'll try and pick something that stays true to that classic Jelly Bean Camo. The closest match we can find in game is that jungle camo, particularly for the Russian side. This kind of matches the colour scheme pretty well, but it doesn't quite have those jelly bean or rabbit ear blobs like on that DPCU pattern. But this just saves us using that paratrooper pattern once again, with it being the in-game name for multicam, which we've used on plenty of these military loadouts so far. So I've always ignored in-game performance for these military-themed or real-life loadouts, and often the combination of attachments has ruined a weapon's performance in some of the other setups. But like I mentioned, with this one it actually all works pretty well. Even though we are using that long-range optic of the ACOG, which I'm usually not a big fan of, it actually works pretty well on that AUG. I found the best strategy was to continuously switch between semi-auto and full auto, depending on whether I was entering into close or long-range engagements. Because of the bullpup design you naturally get that tighter hipfire spread in Battlefield 3, so this kind of alleviates some of the problems usually associated with using an ACOG at close range, since you can get away with just hipfiring the AUG and securing most of your kills. On the other hand, the recoil's not too bad for long range engagements, but you can achieve some super long range accuracy with that semi-auto mode. This also allows you to conserve your ammo that little bit better and allow you to pick off all the enemies you can see through your long range scope across the map. So give this setup a try in game and let me know your thoughts on it. If you're one of my Australian viewers, or if you've just enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a thumbs up just to help spread the word and give the video a little bit more widespread exposure. I've got plenty of great suggestions in the comments of previous videos, but I'm always interested in hearing what loadouts you'd love to see me cover in the future. Otherwise, thanks for watching. I'll catch you all later.